Hello, my name's Tiffany Kemp. Thank you for joining me. Today we're going to be talking about sales agents, referrers and introducers. So if you're one of the many companies that wants to use third parties to add to your sales revenue without having to hire your own salespeople or maybe to supplement their efforts, today's session will be really useful for you. You will be able to find some notes on freecontractadvice.com underneath this video where it's embedded on the page. So what's the difference between an introducer, a referrer and a sales agent? There are some practical differences, but there are also some really important legal differences and some pitfalls that you're going to want to avoid. So I'll start off just talking about referrers because they're I suppose, the third-party sales force that's used most widely by companies all over the world. So a referrer is a third-party individual or company that knows you quite well, that has a reasonable understanding of your products and services. They might even have been a customer of yours in the past. And as they go about their everyday business, either selling their own products or services, or perhaps just networking, it might be that they're a very well-connected individual and they meet a lot of organisations in their travels. If they see somebody who could benefit from your products or services, they'll say, you really need to go and have a chat to this person over here at company X, and that's a referral. It's fairly low key. It may or may not be accompanied by a more formal introduction. So an introduction might take the form of an email to both of you saying, dear X, I'd like to introduce you to Y. Here's a little bit of background about X and their needs. Here's a little bit of background about Y and what they offer. I think you two can help each other out. Off you go and best of luck. So that's a fairly casual introduction, but it can be an extremely valuable one, as anybody, as a salesperson who's tried to make a cold call will know. Having that personal introduction can make all the difference between somebody taking your call and being willing to speak with you and somebody who just says, I'm sorry, I'm not interested. So how do you reward your referrers and introducers? Well, it might depend on whether they're formal or informal. If they're informal, if they're just people who think you're great and want to tell everybody they know about how great you are, the reward might simply come from a warm glow that they're going to get from putting two organisations or two individuals in touch with one another to their mutual benefit. So we all know that it's great to be able to help out a friend or somebody that we like. So those referrers might be entirely happy to work for no reward at all. And so from a contractual point of view, we're not really terribly concerned about those. Introducers who actually make an effort to be actively involved in putting you and the other party in touch with one another by sending an introductory email perhaps. They might even attend your first meeting to help you get to know one another. They'll generally expect some sort of commission or introduction fee or referral fee, which might either be a flat rate, so £50 per introduction, or it might be a percentage of any sales that result from their introduction. So in that scenario, one of the important things about an introducer is that their introduction making isn't the primary role of their business. It's not what they set out to do dawn to dusk, making introductions between different companies and earning commission. And why is that important? Well, if they are setting themselves out purely to match people up and earn commission as a result, there's a risk that they might be considered to be working as a sales agent. Now, I said earlier on that there are some legal pitfalls that you need to be aware of, and a lot of these are to do with sales agents. So in the European Union, there are some regulations called the commercial agents regulations, which mean that sales agents have a set of rights that can't be contracted out of. So if somebody is deemed to be acting as a sales agent for you, then they're entitled to contractual notice periods, which are 1 month if they've been working for you for a year, 2 months if they've been working for you for 2 years, and 3 months if they've been working for you for 3 years or longer. And you can't contract out of that. They're also entitled to come and take a look at your books to make sure that they've been paid the right amount of commission and to make sure that you haven't not paid them commission on a deal that's gone through that perhaps they haven't been aware of. The biggest risk with commercial agents, though, is what happens when you try to get rid of one. So if somebody's been trundling around the country introducing prospects to you on a regular basis, and earning commission for sales that result from their work, and you decide that perhaps they're not performing as well as you might like, and you tell them that the agency is being terminated, they're entitled under the regulations to something called an indemnity or compensation. So those are two terms for effectively the same thing, but they have different calculation mechanisms that we don't need to go into here. So what that means to you as a business owner is that if you use somebody as a sales agent and then you want to get rid of them for some reason, you have to prove that they have breached their contract of agency. So perhaps they've not performed as well as you would expect. You might think that that's just cause for terminating an agency. Well, not if there's any possibility that they could say, well, my failure to perform is because the market's slow, there's been a financial crisis, the economy's in contraction, nobody's buying this kind of widget at the moment. Or if the failure of the agent to make any sales is down to faults on your side in delivery or in quality control, any of those sorts of things could be used by the agent as a defence against you trying to terminate their contract for failure to perform. So you really need to take care if you're trying to remove an agent from your service. You'll also be liable to pay compensation or indemnity if the agent retires due to ill health or old age while they're acting as an agent for you. Considering that a lot of people who do this sort of role are perhaps retired, looking for a way of keeping their hand in with the industry, or semi-retired and working part-time, you can see that there's a real risk that these sorts of agents might well want to retire due to ill health or old age, or even indeed if they die on the job, which sounds dreadful, but obviously it does happen, and if it does, then you could be liable to pay the compensation or indemnity to their family members, to their estate. So what makes somebody a sales agent rather than just an introducer? Where's that dividing line? Well, there are a number of key differentiators. One of those is that the sales agent regs only apply to product sales. They don't apply to sales of services. Now, that's not always a very clear line, and you might say, for example, is software a product or a service? I would err on the side of assuming that it's a product, and that if somebody's selling your software, they will be liable, or rather you will be liable, for paying them compensation when their agency comes to an end. But if, for example, you're an IFA, or you're selling some sort of consulting services, your referrers or introducers are not at risk of being considered sales agents. So the next point to bear in mind is that a sales agent is actually selling. So they're not just putting the two of you in touch with each other, they're actually doing some selling work. So that might be giving the prospect a bit more detail about your products. It might be having meetings with the prospect to demonstrate your product, handing over brochures, price lists. It might even involve the sales agent preparing a quote or a proposal on your behalf. Now, the wording of the sales reg says that a commercial agent is somebody who's authorised to negotiate and conclude sales on your behalf. So we used to think 10 years or so ago that that meant provided you didn't give your agent authority to actually sign contracts for you, then you were safe, you were home dry, they weren't covered by the regulations. Unfortunately, case law over the intervening period has shown that the courts don't deem that as being an essential quality of an agent, and that actually if the agent is selling for you, even if they're not empowered to sign on the dotted line, they can still be considered an agent under the regulations. So let's just do a quick recap and see where we've got to. We've been talking about using third parties to help get your sales rolling in the form of introducers, referrers and sales agents. And we've discussed the fact that referrers are often fairly informal. They'll make referrals for lots of different companies, products and services as they go along, and they may or may not require payment, and therefore they may or may not have any sort of contractual agreement with you. Introducers tend to be a little more formal, and they will make an actual introduction between the two of you and will often expect some commission. Sales agents will go another step further and will get involved in the selling process, and they might even take it all the way through to preparing proposals and closing the deal on your behalf. So out of those three, The sales agent, if you're selling products, is something to be aware of. Have a look at the commercial agents regulations. You can Google it, there'll be a link to it on freecontractadvice.com, and it's actually quite a short bit of legislation and quite easy to read. The version that you'll be linked to through the website is the English law implementation of the regulations, and you need to be aware of that because it does vary slightly across the different EU member states, although the general principle's the same wherever you happen to be in the EU. So I hope that's been of use to you. Please do have a look at freecontractadvice.com. If you want to be notified when new videos are posted, then sign up. You can also download our free ebook if you sign up, so there's a great incentive for you. And I look forward to seeing you next week.